My first and only paranormal experience still blows my mind. As a 28-year-old adult, I still remember the story that happened when I was just 15 years old. At that time, I was a little pothead that loved smoking weed, so at every chance I got, basically every day I'd get high with my friends. But that's not the point. I grew up in a town in the UK that was huge for a town, with nearly 100,000 people. Where I used to live was an estate full of houses. I had a best friend at the time who lived about 20 or 25-minute walk away from my house. But in order to get there, we had to walk through a wooded area that led to a big lake that you would walk around to get near his house. One day, randomly, I was out with my friend and many others when we noticed a lot of police presence in the area near the woods. And there was a police helicopter up in the air. Being curious, we followed the police to the woodlands that separated out our houses. We went through the woods to the lake where the police and ambulance workers were amongst many bystanders at this point. We got there and started asking people who we knew what had happened. We were told that a young boy around the age of 7 had drowned in the lake nearby. And it was right near the path where everyone was gathering. Over the next couple of days, the police were trolling the lake looking for a child who they knew was there because his friend ran out to help when he fell in and couldn't get out. 2 or 3 days later, after he slipped in, the authorities found the young boy's body, which was big news in my town. No later than 24 hours after the boy was found, the local council installed a black metal bench on the footpath near where he had died with a little plaque commemorating his life. That very next day, I was out with my friend near where I lived, and we were getting high, and a bunch of other friends that we knew were there too. By the time we were done getting high, we decided to go back to his house to sleep, because my mom would have gotten crazy over the fact that we were that high. We started to walk back to his house at around 11, and it was really dark out. We passed my house and eventually got to the woods. We walked through the woods and got to the start of the lake. We started walking down the side of the lake down the path toward where the kid drowned and the bench was. We were just talking nonsense as high teens did when I noticed that when the bench got into sight, there was a man that sat on it. Now, I was a bit freaked out, but I didn't say anything yet. It was 11 p.m. near the woods in the dark, so it was creepy. But when I got a little closer, I noticed I could see what the man was wearing, and he was dressed as a priest. You know, black jacket, white collar. Upon seeing this priest, I breathed a sigh of relief, because I was presuming that he was maybe praying or something of the sort, maybe for the kid that had drowned. So after noticing this priest, I just watched him sit there as I got closer and closer. I didn't say anything to my friend who was right next to me, but we collectively stopped talking once we noticed him. As we got closer, it was more obvious that he was a priest, and then once we got within 5 meters, he was gone. I felt like I blinked and he just disappeared. When we were walking past the actual bench where I saw him sit, there was nobody there. But if he would have gotten up and walked away, I would have seen him because it was a one-track walkway. But he just vanished. After I got to the bench, I turned to my friend, who was just as confused and spooked as I was. I asked him if he had seen the man that sat on the bench. I didn't want to say what type of man because the way he was dressed was very obvious as to what type of man he was. But I asked him, "Did you just see that man sitting on the bench?" He said, "Yeah, the guy dressed like a priest." When I tell you my heart sunk, I can't explain that feeling or that situation. What gets me is that I purposely asked my friend that he was a man, and he corrected me by saying that the man was a priest. If it was a person, they would have just maybe got up and walked away, straight down the line in the path, which we would have seen. Or they would have just walked right past us, but no, when we got close, poof, gone. Still to this day, it's my only paranormal experience, but it blows my mind every time I think about it. I still wonder if that priest was a ghost or if he was a real person. Perhaps he was there to offer his prayers to the young boy who drowned. But why did he disappear so suddenly? Was it some kind of supernatural occurrence? Or was it just a trick of the light? If we were seeing things, maybe. These questions still plague me, and the incident left a lasting impression on me too, and I became more curious about the paranormal. I started reading books on ghosts, hauntings, and the supernatural. I even visited haunted places and went on ghost hunts with friends, but nothing ever came close to that one experience I had by the lake. Looking back on that night, I realized how easily we could have been in danger. Walking in the woods at night while under the influence of drugs was not the smartest thing to do, but we were young and foolish, and we thought nothing could harm us. Little did we know that we were about to have a brush with the unknown. In conclusion, that night by the lake remains one of the most mysterious and puzzling experiences of my life. It taught me to be more aware of my surroundings and to always keep an open mind. Who knows what other strange and unexplainable events might be lurking around the corner. My family tree. I have many stories to tell, mostly passed down from my dad. One of the earliest tales goes back to when I was only 2 years old. My dad showed me a picture of my great uncles, and as he pointed to each person, I suddenly interrupted him and pointed to the guy in the photo, exclaiming, "That's my Uncle Joe." My dad was taken back and asked how I knew him, to which I simply replied, "He comes up to my room every night to tell me jokes." My dad then informed me that Uncle Joe had actually died before I was even born. It was a spooky realization for such a young age. But that wasn't the only spooky encounter my dad has had. He used to work on an apartment house, and one day he was up on the roof talking to a neighbor when he noticed one of his tools started to smoke. Now, nothing was plugged in or even on, but all of his tools suddenly caught on fire. In a panic, my dad started to throw his tools off the roof, losing about $100,000 worth of them in just 1 minute. It was a devastating loss, but it wasn't the only strange occurrence in that apartment. There was also a ball in the kitchen that seemed to have a mind of its own. Whenever anybody walked into the kitchen, the ball would roll over into the living room. And when someone walked into the living room, the ball would roll back into the kitchen. It was as if the ball was alive and had a mischievous nature. My dad decided to throw it out the window, thinking that that was going to be the end of it. And when he turned around, the ball was right back in front of him again. He tried to get rid of it by shredding it 3 times, but the ball always seemed to find its way back to him. Finally, he was able to get rid of it for good, though. It's amazing to think that we still own that same apartment house today. Whenever I think about these stories, it sends shivers down my spine, and they're just a few examples of the strange and unexplainable things that seem to happen in this world, and I'm grateful to have them as a part of my family's history. It's been 5 days now, and I'm feeling tempted to use a Ouija board. Day 1. I woke up at 3 a.m., the first night. It's a common occurrence for me, so I didn't think much about it. I groggily glanced at the clock, rubbed my eyes, and tried to fall back asleep. Day 2. The next night was different. I woke up at 3:33 a.m., feeling disoriented, and I stared at the wall while lying on my stomach in bed. It was as if my eyes were open before I was even fully regaining consciousness. I couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that something was off, but I brushed it aside and tried to go back to sleep. Day 3. The following night was when things took a strange turn. I jolted awake at 4:43 a.m., and as I turned to look at the same time, I saw something that sent a chill down my spine. A folded old-time screen, the kind people used to change behind, fell in front of me. It happened just a second after I woke up, as if it had been waiting for me to open my eyes. I quickly snapped a photo, but I couldn't fathom how the screen had ended up there, and I had no idea how to attach a photo to share with anybody. Day 4. On the 4th night, I was hanging out with my roommates, trying to distract myself from the strange things the past few nights. My fan was already on, but the light was off, and suddenly the light turned on in front of us. It caught us all off guard, and we tried to rationalize it as a circuit malfunction. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Day 5, present time. Now I'm at the present moment, and events have only escalated. I was in my roommate's room trying to calm my nerves when I heard a loud crash coming from my own room. My heart raced as I rushed to investigate, and I was horrified to find out that my Ouija board had fallen off of the top shelf. The shelf is so high that I need a step stool to reach it, and there's no logical explanation for how it could have fallen on its own. The incidents were becoming too frequent and too strange to dismiss as mere coincidences. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was trying to communicate with me, and I was getting increasingly unnerved. My mind was filled with questions and doubts, and I found myself constantly on edge, anticipating the next inexplicable event. I confided in my roommates, but they were as puzzled as I was. They tried to rationalize the occurrences, attributing them to being faulty wiring or drafts in the house. But deep down, I knew there was something more to it. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following me wherever I went. Sleep eluded me, and I found myself dreading the nighttime, knowing that it would bring more unsettling experiences. I became obsessed with finding answers, scouring the internet for stories of similar occurrences and consulting with experts in the paranormal field. But despite my efforts, I couldn't find any plausible explanations for what was actually happening here. As the days went by, my mental state deteriorated. I became paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at every little sound. I isolated myself from my roommates, afraid of whatever was haunting me would harm them too. My once peaceful home had turned into a place of unease and fear. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I took drastic measures to try to rid myself of the strange things. I performed rituals, cleansings, and even sought the help of a psychic, but nothing seemed to work. If anything, the incidents only seemed to intensify. It was as if my efforts to confront the unknown entity had only provoked it further. The lack of sleep and constant state of fear took a toll on my physical and mental health. Dark circles formed around my eyes, and my once cheerful demeanor turned into a constant state of anxiety. I was on edge, always on high alert, trying to anticipate the next inexplicable event that would shake me to my core. One particularly unsettling night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in my room. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously investigated, but there was no one there. I searched every nook and cranny, but the room was empty. I couldn't shake off the feeling that someone or something had to be there, lurking in the shadows, watching me. The experience left me trembling and on edge for days, unable to find any explanation for what had happened. Desperate for answers, I decided to dig deeper into the history of the house. I visited the local library and uncovered some unsettling information. It turned out that the house I was living in had a dark past. It had been owned by a family that had experienced a tragic loss years ago. Rumors of paranormal activities had circulated in the town, but most people had dismissed them as urban legends. Armed with this new information, I delved further into the history of the family that had once lived in the house. I discovered that they had used a Ouija board in attempts to communicate with their deceased loved one, but had unknowingly unleashed something malevolent. The occurrences that they had been experiencing seemed to mirror their own, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that their tragic history was now repeating itself with me. With a renewed sense of purpose, I sought out the help of a paranormal investigator. They conducted an extensive investigation of the house using various tools and techniques to communicate with any potential entities. The results were chilling. Electronic voice phenomena, EVP recording, captured eerie voices, and the EMF readings were off the charts in certain areas of the house. The investigator confirmed that there was indeed a presence in the house, and it seemed to be drawn to my energy. Armed with this information, I decided to confront the entity head on. I conducted my own research on how to communicate with spirits safely, and I gathered the necessary tools, including the Ouija board that had fallen off the shelf. With trepidation, I set up the board in the living room, surrounded by candles and a protective symbol. As I placed my hands on the planchette and asked questions, I felt a surge of energy in the room. The planchette moved erratically, spelling out cryptic messages that sent shivers down my spine. It seemed like the entity was desperate to communicate, but its messages were confusing and unsettling. I could feel its anger and frustration, but I couldn't decipher its true intentions. The session left me emotionally drained and more confused than ever. I couldn't make sense of the messages I had received. and I was no closer to understanding the true nature of the entity that was haunting me. The activity in the house seemed to have escalated, with objects moving on their own, disembodied voices echoing through the walls, and it had an oppressive atmosphere that hung heavy in the air. One night I woke up to find scratches on my arms, as if someone or something had clawed me while I slept. The marks were deep and painful, and I was filled with dread. I knew that I had to take drastic action to rid myself of the entity once and for all. I sought the help of a renowned psychic medium who conducted a cleansing and a blessing ritual on the house. The energy in the house shifted, and the activity seemed to subside for a while. But just when I thought I was finally rid of the entity, it returned with a vengeance. One night I woke up to the sound of whispers in my ear. I could feel icy breath against my skin, and my heart raced in fear. Turning on the lights, but there was no one. The whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. I tried to ignore them, but they followed me everywhere I went in the house. Feeling desperate and exhausted, I decided to reach out to a paranormal expert who had dealt with a similar case. The expert, a seasoned investigator with years of experience, came to my house and conducted a thorough investigation. They confirmed that the entity was indeed still present, but its energy seemed to be growing stronger. The expert explained that sometimes entities can become attached to a particular place or person, and it can be challenging to remove them. They suggested a more aggressive approach involving a cleansing ritual that would require my active participation. I agreed, willing to do whatever it took to regain control of my home and my sanity. The cleansing ritual was intense and emotionally draining. We smudged the entire house with sage, performed prayers and chants, and set up protective barriers. I could feel the entity's presence growing more agitated, but I stood my ground, determined to confront it once and for all. As the ritual reached its climax, there was a sudden surge of energy in the room. Objects flew off shelves, furniture moved on its own, and the temperature dropped drastically. The expert and I stood our ground, holding on to our faith and determination. We continued with the ritual, pouring out all the energy into cleansing the space. Finally, after what felt like hours, the activity ceased. The house was quiet and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. I could feel a sense of peace and relief wash over me. The expert confirmed that the entity had been banished, and I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. In the aftermath of the ordeal, I reflected on the harrowing experiences I'd gone through. It had been a grueling journey filled with fear, uncertainty, and sleeplessness. But it had also been a profound learning experience. I had learned to confront my fears, seek help when needed, and never underestimate the powers of the paranormal. Months passed and the house remained peaceful. I had finally regained my sense of safety and security in my own home. The scratches on my arms had healed, and the dark circles under my eyes faded. I had learned to appreciate the simple joys of a good night's sleep in a peaceful home, knowing that not everyone is as fortunate as me. To this day, I'm not sure what exactly haunted me during those sleepless nights. Was it the restless spirit of the family that had once lived in the house? Or is it something more malevolent that had been drawn to my energy? I may never know for sure, but the experience has left an indelible mark on me. I no longer dismiss stories of the paranormal as mere superstitions. I've come to believe that there are forces beyond our own understanding, and that some places may hold a dark history that can linger long after the events have passed. I'm more cautious about dabbling in the unknown, and I have learned to respect the boundaries of the spirit world. As I look back on my ordeal, I'm grateful for the support I received from my friends and family and the paranormal expert who helped me through the darkest moments. It was a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and facing my deepest fears. Though the scars may remain, I have emerged stronger, wiser, and with a newfound appreciation for the unexplainable mysteries of the world. My possibly haunted apartment. A few weeks ago, I posted a strange occurrence in my apartment where I heard a girl or a woman say, "Uh-oh," one night when I was alone. Since then, I've been compiling a list of other weird things that have happened in my apartment. As I go over them, I can't help but wonder what other people would think. It all started in early 2021. I'd moved into the apartment in late 2019, and for the first year and a half, I hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. But all that changed one day. I was hanging out with some friends in a Discord voice chat when I glanced down the length of my hallway. Just by turning my head, I could see down the hallway into the dining room, and from there, I could see my desk. To my surprise, I saw what looked like a shadow of a woman's arm in the doorway of the dining room, as if the woman it was connected to was standing just inside, out of sight. At first, I thought maybe it was just a shadow, but I saw it clear enough that it caught my attention. It was still there after I looked away once or twice. I was about to tell the Discord chat about it when it finally disappeared. I convinced myself I hadn't seen anything at all. A few months later, sometime around November 2021, February 2022, I was awakened one night by what sounded like a choir singing. It was as if people were singing in my room. Now, there is a church next door, but I've never heard them practice before, and it was around 3 a.m. in the morning. I lay there fully awake, very confused, until the noise finally stopped. I convinced myself that it was only a very late-night practice for the church next door. Over a year later, earlier this year, I was sitting on the couch in the living room playing solitaire on my phone, and preparing to get ready for bed. As I sat there, fully awake and aware of all the noises around me, I heard a young woman or maybe a child's voice say, "Uh-oh," from the direction of the dining room. I've heard other people's TVs and sounds from the apartments around me before, but they all sounded muffled and quiet. This wasn't. It was clear and loud. A couple of weeks later, I was in the dining room, bent over, grabbing a couple of water bottles from the cask in the corner of the room. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught some movement. I watched as something, perhaps a lady's skirt, moved from one corner of the room to the other. This wasn't just something that I saw and then wasn't there when I went to look back. I watched as it moved across the floor for several seconds. I never thought to stand up and turn around. Why, I'll never know. Finally, last night, I was listening to someone on YouTube talk about a 1980 film, when suddenly, along with the audio from the video, I heard what sounded like a woman's wordless, barely audible whispering right next to my left ear. It stopped me in my tracks. I frowned, rewound the video to where I had first heard it, and it simply wasn't there. It had never been in the video. All of these incidents have left me wondering what was going on in my apartment. Is it haunted, or is it just my imagination? I've tried to explain these things away, but the more they happen, the less I'm able to do so. The incident that stands out the most to me is the girl and young woman saying, "Uh-oh," in the dining room. It was so clear and loud that it couldn't be explained away by any logical means. And the fact that it was heard in the same room where I saw the shadow of a woman's arm and where I saw something move across the floor only adds to the mystery. I've tried to come up with explanations for these strange events. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe I'm tired, stressed, and just imagining things. Or perhaps there's something paranormal happening in my apartment. I have tried to research the history of the building and the surrounding area to see if there's anything that might explain these things. So far, I haven't found anything that would suggest that the building's haunted, or that anything unusual happened in the area. At this point, I'm not sure what to do. Should I try to ignore these strange things and hope that they go away, or should I try to investigate further? The idea of investigating further is intriguing and terrifying. What if I find out something sinister is happening in my apartment? I have talked to some friends about it and what's been happening in my apartment, but they all seem skeptical. They think I'm overreacting or that there must be some logical explanation for what I'm experiencing. But I know what I've seen and heard, and I can't explain it away. I've also considered reaching out to paranormal investigators to see if they can shed any light on what's been happening in my apartment, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for that level of investigation. For now, I'm just going to try to stay calm and continue to document any strange occurrences in my apartment. Maybe one day I'll find a logical explanation for what's been happening. Or maybe I'll uncover something that I never expected to find. Either way, I know that I'll never forget the strange events that have taken place in my apartment. Strange something from the other side. I I still vividly remember the day when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I started getting into these really morbid thinking patterns. It happened all after asking my mom what happened when we died, and her answer left me feeling shaken. "No one really knows," she said. "Some people think we go to heaven. Some people think we're reborn. But mostly, people think it's likely nothing. Everything just ends." That thought rattled around my head for a while, and the next day I couldn't stop thinking about how someday I'm going to die and there's no way to escape it. I felt like living was pointless. If it was just going to end up abruptly someday, possibly without any warning, die. So I decided I'd rather just die right then and there. This thought consumed me, and I just kept wishing it, thinking it over and over. "I want to die now, just take me now." I repeated my mantra all day and night. The next day I woke up and felt a really strange sensation. It was like a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach that filled my whole being with dread. We had these marble stairs at my parents' house that were really slippery, and I used to race up and down them all the time and fall a lot. My knees were always bruised and my shins had painful bumps on them from falling. I bet you all remember that from your youth, how painful those shin bumps get. Anyway, that day I was walking down the stairs from the top floor, uncharacteristically slowly and carefully, but my flip-flop got caught on the stair, and I felt myself begin to fall. Suddenly I was enveloped with this white, wispy, cloud-like apparition. The space it occupied around me felt cool, had no real form or shape, but it felt like it was cognizant. It seemed to be asking me if I really meant I wanted to die. Panic filled me and I thought, no, I don't really want to. Suddenly, as it appeared, the white cloudy entity disappeared, and I was at the bottom of the stairs on my feet. I'm more of a skeptic when it comes to these things, so I often tried to think of a scientific explanation for what I saw and felt that day. Was it fainting, a seizure maybe? But even after all these years, I can't explain it. I still think of this event often, and I never told any of my family except my husband a few years back. It's a memory that stuck with me, and I've often been wondering about some sort of divine intervention or just a coincidence. All I know is that it made me think twice about the things I wished for and the power of my thoughts. Now, as an adult, I realize that death is a natural part of life, and that we should cherish the time we have with our loved ones. But that experience has stayed with me, and I'll never forget the strange white wispy cloud that seemed to be asking me if I really was being sure about what I was wishing for. Maybe it was just my imagination, maybe it was something more. Either way, it's a memory that stayed with me for all these years. A dark time in my life. In October 2018, I decided to move in with my girlfriend for the first time. I'll refer to her as Jane. Little did I know what would happen in the 5 months that would follow. If I knew, I would never have agreed to move in. I vividly remember the night that everything started. It was a very important night, and I'll come back to this part later in the story. One night, Jane's mother and brother came over to stay with us. Unfortunately, I wasn't feeling very well, so I decided to relax in our bedroom while they hung out on the porch till late at night. Jane came in at some point and asked if I needed anything. She seemed genuinely concerned. A little while after that, I was in bed alone with my eyes closed when I felt a hand on my arm, and I opened my eyes. Jane was kneeling next to our bed, touching me, and asked if I needed anything again. She had a really condescending look on her face, which was initially just annoying to me. I replied that I was fine. I closed my eyes again, hoping she'd let me rest. A minute later, I opened my eyes again because I didn't hear her leave the room or open the door to leave. She was gone. I looked next to the bed because I was thinking, is this crazy chick laying on the floor or something? She wasn't there, so I looked at the door and saw the hallway light coming from underneath it. Now, I was never asleep, and I was questioning how I never saw the light shine in when she came in the room or heard it. I went to text her to see if she had just come in the room again, but decided against it. I didn't ask at this point because I didn't want to seem crazy to her family that was over, and honestly, I knew that was the right choice. She had never come into the room. A few nights after that, I remember laying in bed with Jane and feeling her hand touch my thigh, and then I felt the fingers drag away. She was asleep and I was creeped out. Eventually I told her about it the first night and we both just agreed that it was something really weird. We both just brushed it off. About a week after that first incident, I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw a black sphere just floating in the corner of the room near the ceiling. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and at this point, I was wide awake and it was still there. It started to move towards me across the room, got about a foot away from my face and stared into it. What I saw was facial features more lion-like than human. I remember big teeth, and what instantly stood out to me was that its face looked very condescending. I felt like whatever this was, it wanted me to know that it was the same thing I crossed paths with weeks prior. I told Jane about the things that were happening, and she never thought I was lying, but I'll admit that there were times I seriously started to question myself, until things started happening to other people around me. I'll get into that soon. One day I went out to our back porch to smoke, and when I stopped outside, the porch light dimmed way down. I thought she turned on a machine in the house or something. I went to tighten the bulb, but there was a glass fixture around where it was screwed in, and I just decided I didn't feel like getting a screwdriver. A minute later, I came back full strength as always. This porch can't be accessed from anywhere inside the apartment, it's screened in. There's no other door to the outside. The next few days were a blur to me. I didn't know what to do or who to turn to. I couldn't stay in that apartment for any longer and I had to get out of there. I was afraid for my life and I knew that if I stayed there any longer, something terrible would happen to me. I started looking for a new place. I didn't want to live alone, so I looked for a roommate. After a few days of searching, I found someone that was looking for a roommate too. We met and I told him everything that had happened to me and he believed me and offered to let me stay with him until I found a new place to live. A few days later, I moved in with my new roommate and I felt safer there, but I was still haunted by what had happened to me and I couldn't sleep. I was afraid to be alone. One day I woke up to a loud noise in the middle of the night. I went to investigate and I saw the front door was wide open. I was alone in the apartment and I knew that I had locked the door before I went to bed. I searched the apartment, but there was no one there. I started to think that whatever was haunting me had followed me to this new place. I didn't know what to do, so I decided to seek help of a paranormal investigator. The investigator came to my apartment, and we went through the place with all this equipment. We found nothing unusual, and he told me that there was no evidence of any paranormal activity in the apartment. I was relieved, but still didn't feel safe. I decided to see a therapist. I needed to talk to someone about what had happened to me. The therapist listened to my story and told me that what I experienced was probably a manifestation of my own fears or anxieties. He said that I needed to confront my fears and try to move on from what had happened. Over time, I started to feel better. I no longer felt like something was following me, and I was able to sleep at night. I moved into a new place and I started a new chapter of my life. Looking back on that time, I still don't know what to make of it, though. Was it all in my head? Was it a manifestation of my own fears and anxieties? Or was there really something paranormal going on? I may never know the answer, but one thing's for sure. I'll never forget those 5 months that I spent with Jane. It was a time in my life that changed me forever, and I'll always be haunted by the memories of what happened in that apartment. Something odd happened when my sister had a bad trip on shrooms. I remember a similar experience I had a few years ago. It was a beautiful summer evening, and I was with a group of friends sitting around a campfire in the woods. We decided to take some mushrooms, and I remember feeling a sense of excitement mixed with a little bit of nervousness. It wasn't my first time taking them, but I was always a little apprehensive about it and the unpredictable nature of the experience. As the night progressed, we all started to feel the effects of the mushrooms. The colors around us seemed brighter, and the sounds of nature more intense, and the stars above us appeared to be dancing. We all had moments of deep introspection, and I remembered feeling a sense of oneness with the universe. But then when my friend started having a bad trip, she became paranoid and convinced that someone was watching us. We tried to calm her down, but nothing seemed to work. Eventually we decided it would be best if we took her home. As we were walking back to the car, my friend turned to me and said, "I feel like I've lived this day so many times." Her words struck me as profound, and I couldn't help but wonder if she was tapping into some sort of universal truth. We finally made it back to her house, and I put on her favorite TV show and tried to distract her. She seemed to be doing better, so I decided to head home. But as I was walking out the door, I heard a loud pounding on the front door. It was past midnight, and I couldn't imagine who'd be knocking at this hour. My friend looked at me with fear in her eyes. I couldn't tell, but maybe something wasn't right with her. I asked her if she knew who it was, but she said she didn't. The knocking continued, and I decided to go downstairs and check it out. As I opened the front door, I was greeted by nothingness. There was no one there. I turned around to go back upstairs and found that my friend was frozen in terror at the top. She said she heard knocking on the side of the window. But when we checked, no one there also. We both felt a sense of unease and decided to stay up a while longer. My friend asked me to pour cold water on her head and try to snap her out of it, and I did. Slowly she started to come back to reality, and we both realized that something strange had just happened. I don't know if it was the mushrooms or if there was something else at play, but that experience stuck with me, made me wonder if there are other dimensions or realities out there that we can't perceive with our normal senses. Or maybe it was just a strange coincidence. Either way, it was a night I won't forget. Paranormal experience. So yeah, let me tell you about this really interesting experience I had with this necklace that I won on an online auction. It was a beautiful piece, and I was pretty proud of myself for winning the bid. The seller was a German man, so it took a while for the package to arrive, but when it finally did, I couldn't wait to put it on. From the moment I held it in my hands, I felt a strange connection to it too. I started wearing the necklace every day, and for the first month, everything seemed fine. But then weird things started happening to me. And it was on a Sunday or Saturday morning. I remember being in a relaxed state, maybe even half asleep, when I heard the voice of a little girl talking to me. I couldn't understand what she was saying, but I was certain that it was a girl's voice. The strange part was that everyone else in the house was asleep, so it made me freak out a little bit. Then another strange event happened on Wednesday night. It was around 10 p.m., and I usually go to bed around 9 or 9:30. I was feeling relaxed, and I was in that half-asleep state, half-awake state, when I realized I was hearing a female voice, humming a tune that I could recognize. The thing is, my parents were downstairs, and my brother was sleeping, so I couldn't figure out where the voice was coming from. It scared me at first, but I tried to brush it off and just let myself fall asleep. After these events, I talked to my mother about what was happening. You see, I always had a tendency to see weird things and have strange experiences, but I had never really talked to anybody about it before. My mom was trying to understand why this was happening to me, and we had a long talk in private. As we were discussing possible reasons, she mentioned something about my room, and that's when it hit me. The necklace. It was a vintage piece from the 1920s or 30s, and I suddenly had a hunch that it might be related to the strange occurrences. I decided to take some action just to be safe. I got some holy water and poured it over the necklace, hoping that it would cleanse whatever energy was attached to it. After that, I did have a few more events, but I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me again. Despite the strange experiences, I couldn't bring myself to stop wearing the necklace. There was something about it that drew me in. Even with all the unexplained occurrences, I felt like there were memories of the girl who had worn the necklace before me still lingering within it. It's hard to explain, but I didn't mind. In fact, I found it somewhat comforting to think that a part of her was still in the necklace. But it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something special about this piece of jewelry. I continued to wear the necklace every day, and over time, the strangest events seemed to subside. I learned to accept that there might be just some mystery surrounding the necklace, but it didn't bother me anymore. In fact, I grew to appreciate the unique history and the energy that the necklace seemed to possess. It became a part of my daily routine, and I found myself feeling a sense of connection to the girl who had worn it before me. Years have passed since I first won the necklace, and I still wear it to this day. It's become a cherished item in my collection, and I often find myself wondering about the girl who owned it. What was her story? Why did the necklace seem to have a mysterious effect on me? Was it just my imagination, or was there something more to it? These questions plagued my mind as I continued to wear the necklace every day, despite the strange occurrences that seemed to be connected to it. One day, while doing some research about the necklace's origins, I came across a news article from the 1920s that caught my attention. It was about a young girl who had gone missing in Germany during that time period. The article mentioned that she had been wearing a distinctive necklace similar to the one I now possessed. Could it be possible that this necklace was somehow connected to that missing girl? The thought sent chills down my spine, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that the necklace was not just a piece of jewelry, but held some kind of deeper significance. I decided to dig deeper into the history of the necklace and its previous owners. After some extensive research, I discovered that the necklace had indeed belonged to a young girl named Anna who had gone missing in Germany in the 1920s. She was never found, and her disappearance remained a mystery. The necklace had been up for auction by a collector who had acquired it from a real estate, and that's how it ended up in my possession. Armed with this newfound information, I couldn't help but feel a strong sense of curiosity and intrigue. I wanted to know more about Anna and what had happened to her. I reached out to local historians and even managed to track down some of Anna's distant relatives in Germany. Through my conversations with them, I learned that Anna had been a young girl with a passion for music. She had been an aspiring singer and had a beautiful voice. She had worn the necklace as a lucky charm during her performances, and it was known to hum a particular tune that was her favorite. As I delved deeper into Anna's story, I realized that the strange occurrences I had experienced, such as hearing a little girl's voice and humming in my half-awake state, seemed to align with Anna's interests and habits. It was as if the spirit was somehow connected to the necklace itself, and her presence was still lingering in it. Despite the initial fear and confusion, I began to sense empathy towards Anna. I could understand her love for music and her attachment to the necklace. It became clear to me that Anna's spirit was not haunting me, but rather seeking some kind of connection or recognition. I decided to embrace Anna's presence and honor her memory. I started to learn the tune that she would hum, and I practiced singing it. I also visited her hometown in Germany, where I paid my respects to her grave and left flowers in her memory. As time went on, the strange occurrences gradually subsided, but I continued to wear the necklace every single day. It became more than just a piece of jewelry to me. It was a symbol of a young girl's dreams and passions, and a reminder that the mysterious connection I had experienced. I shared Anna's story with my close friends and family, and they were all fascinated by the tale of the necklace and its history. Some were skeptical, dismissing it as a mere superstition, while others were more open-minded and intrigued by the possibility of the supernatural. Regardless of others' opinions, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for having had this unique experience myself. It had opened my eyes to the mysteries of the world that made me realize that there were still many things beyond my comprehension, and it had also given me a sense of empathy towards those that had experienced unexplained phenomenon or had beliefs in the supernatural. Years passed and I continued to wear the necklace, but the strange occurrences had ceased completely. I had moved on with my life, but I still held a special place in my heart for Anna and the necklace. I had come to see it as a cherished memento, a connection to a young girl whose story that had touched me deeply. One day out of the blue, I received an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 70s introduced herself as Gertrude, Anna's niece. She had heard about my interest in Anna's story and had come all the way from Germany to meet me. Gertrude explained that she had grown up hearing stories about her Aunt Anna and had disappeared so mysteriously all those years ago. She had inherited some of Anna's belongings, including old letters and photographs, but the necklace was missing. She had always wondered what had happened to it. When she learned that I had the necklace and I had been wearing it all this time, she was overwhelmed with emotions. She told me that Anna had been very dear to her and her family, and they had always hoped for some closure or resolution about the mystery of her disappearance. As Gertrude and I talked, we shared our experiences and feelings about Anna. She was grateful to hear that I had honored Anna's memory and had tried to understand her story. She also confirmed that Anna had indeed been passionate about music and had loved to sing, and the necklace had been a significant symbol to her dreams. Gertrude expressed her desire to have the necklace back in the family, as she saw it as a precious heirloom that rightfully belonged to Anna's memory. I understood her sentiments and gladly handed over the necklace to her. It felt like the right thing to do, and I was glad to have played a part in bringing some closure to Anna's family. As Gertrude left, she thanked me with tears in her eyes and told me that she believed Anna's spirit had found peace knowing that her necklace was back with her family. I felt a sense of fulfillment and closure as well, knowing that I'd been able to honor Anna's memory and bring some comfort to her family. In the end, I realized that the mysterious effect of the necklace on me had been a combination of my own emotions and experiences, as well as the intriguing history and story behind it. It had led me on a unique journey of discovery and empathy, and it had ultimately brought a sense of resolution to a long-standing mystery. I continued to cherish the memory of Anna and the necklace, but the strange occurrences never returned. I learned to appreciate the beauty of life's mysteries and the wonders of the unknown, and I carried the lessons and memories of the experience with me for the rest of my life. Has anyone had similar encounters or have insight on the phenomenon I'll detail below? I never thought I'd be the type of person to believe in something like this, but lately I can't help but feel like there's something more going on than what meets the eye. It all started about 6 months ago, and I began to notice a presence around me at night. At first it was just a feeling like something was watching me, but then I started to see them, these shadow people that seemed to be everywhere. And the more I watched, the more I realized that there was something different about them. I've always believed that psilocybin could grow and allow us to perceive more than our normal senses allow. And maybe that's what's happening here. Maybe these entities are something that exists beyond our normal reality, something that we can only see when our minds are open to the possibility. I don't know, but I do know that these encounters are real, and they happen every night. The entities seem to be a combination of two different phenomena that people have been encountering forever. They start off as shadow people, but as I focus on them, their form seems to dissipate. And I'm left looking at actual human beings. Their fashion sense is even very modern too, like they could be walking down the street in any American city. But they're not solid at all, and they're pretty translucent, like ghostly-like. I currently live in a fenced-off vacant property in an urban area. I was hired to live here as security and clean up the property to prepare for development. But the recent price increases in construction supplies, the development companies put the project on hold, leaving me here with these entities as my only company. What's interesting is that they never arrive alone. There's typically dozens of them, broken up into little crowds doing their own thing. And while they seem to be silently communicating with each other, I can't hear anything at all. It's like there could be loud music or cheering from their perspective, but from mine it's completely silent. One thing that's really strange is that I never feel threatened or creeped out by their presence, even when they're watching me. Like they're over right now as I write this, I feel content and safe. If they were actual people, I would feel very uncomfortable and likely act hostile towards them depending on the circumstance. But these entities, I don't feel any negative vibes at all. I've tried to do some research online to see if there's anything out there that can explain what I'm experiencing, but I haven't found anything that matches up with what I'm seeing. That's why I've decided to reach out and try to obtain some understanding regarding my recent experiences. I don't know what these entities are or what they want, but I'm hoping that something out there can shed some light on the situation or someone. Any information is welcome, and I'm open to any questions, comments, or discussions that can help me achieve a better level of understanding. For now, I'll just keep observing and try to make a sense of what's happening around me. I've always been a believer that there's more to psilocybin than just hallucinations. To me, it feels like it can open up a portal to another dimension or reality, allowing us to perceive things that our normal senses don't allow. That being said, I recently experienced something that left me feeling completely puzzled. I'm hoping to gain some insight by sharing my story. It all started with my sisters took mushrooms at a campfire. One of them had a bad trip, so I had to go and get her. I brought her puppy with me and took her home, putting on the TV show Friends to help her settle down. Everything seemed back to normal, and I decided to head back to bed, leaving her downstairs. About 10 minutes later, I heard a pounding on the front door, and my sister was yelling my name. I started heading down the stairs, and she was heading up, looking very worried. I asked if someone was there, and she said that she didn't know. There was another knock on the door, and I started to feel uneasy. I opened the door, but there was nobody outside. My sister looked petrified and said she was sure she was about to die. I tried to calm her down and eventually went back downstairs with her. She made me dump cold water on her head a few times. There were a couple more knocks on the side window, even though no one was there. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there outside my house, even though I couldn't see it. This experience left me on edge for a few minutes, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was connected to my sister's bad trip, and if I was somehow experiencing something too. This event made me think back to my experiences with psilocybin and how it can open up portals to other dimensions or realities. It feels like we're able to perceive more than what our senses typically allow, and I wonder if this is what happened to me and my sister that night. I'm a skeptic by nature, and I always try to come up with a scientific explanation for my unusual experiences. However, this time I couldn't explain what happened, and it left me with more questions than answers. I've always been able to explore the unknown, but this experience left me feeling a bit uneasy. I'm now even more cautious about what else is out there that we can't see or explain. I've always believed that there are things in this world that are beyond our understanding, and it seems like I've been experiencing one of them for the past 6 months. I've seen what appear to be entities that have aspects of both shadow people and translucent ghosts. They usually make their presence known only at night, and they seem to be able to observe me as much as I'm observing them. I spend countless hours observing them, and I can say that for sure they're not threatening or giving off any negative vibes. These entities usually appear as shadow people at first, but once I focus on them, their shadow form dissipates, but they take on the form of a human being. They're translucent and seem to be dressed in modern fashion. It's almost as if they're attending a party with dozens of individuals broken up into little groups doing their own thing. I can't hear anything from my perspective, but from their perspective, there could be loud music or cheering voices. I have been living in a fenced-off vacant property in an urban area, hired to serve as security to prevent trespassing and clean up the property. The property was supposed to be in development with plans to build an apartment complex on it, but the project's been on hold due to skyrocketing prices of lumber and construction supplies. So I've been here for quite some time, spending my time on the presence of these entities. One thing that surprises me is that I don't feel threatened or creeped out by them when they're around. I don't even feel bothered when they're watching me, which is the case as I write this. There are at least 2 of them fixated on me. And as though it's a bit eerie regarding the overall situation, the actual presence and watchfulness don't bother me at all. I have tried to find information online about this specific phenomenon, but I've come up empty-handed. I don't know what these entities are or what they want, and I've been trying to understand them better and find some explanation for what I'm experiencing. But so far, I've been unsuccessful. I don't know if they're trying to communicate with me or they're just passing through. In conclusion, I'm reaching out to anyone who might have some insight to this phenomenon. I welcome any information, questions, or comments that could help me achieve a better understanding of what I'm experiencing. Thank you for taking the time to read my post, and I hope that all together we can shed some light on this mysterious phenomenon and why the text repeats itself so many times. Ghost cats? Ghost dogs? Ghost animals? Have you ever experienced the presence of a ghostly animal? Perhaps a feline friend or a spectral pup? I have, and it's left me feeling equal parts spooked and fascinated. It all started a few months ago when I first noticed a ghostly cat in my home. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but as time went on, I couldn't ignore the strange sightings any longer. The cat could appear out of nowhere, dissipating into thin air as soon as it sensed the gaze. At times, it seemed to fade in and out of visibility, leaving me feeling like I was losing my mind. As the days passed, I started to see more and more ghostly cats around me. Some were tuxedo cats, others were fluffy white cats and tabby spots, and there were even a ginger and a white cat that made an appearance. Each one was as see-through as the last, and I knew that for sure they weren't my own pets. I have a Russian blue mixed with a mackerel bobby-tail tabby, both of which looked nothing like the ghost cats. But it wasn't just cats that I was seeing. One day I caught the sight of a ghostly dog that looked uncannily like my own. It was more white than my dog, but the resemblance was striking. I wondered if it could be a relative of my pet, but then I remembered that my dog was the only one of its kind in the area. The sightings continued, and I continued to wonder with these ghost animals and why they were appearing to me. Were they lost spirits trapped between this world and the next, or were they simply figments of my overactive imagination? Despite my unease, I found myself growing more and more intrigued by these ghostly creatures. I started doing research, reading up on paranormal activity and the ways in which ghosts manifest themselves. I even visited a psychic medium, hoping to get some answers. The medium was able to sense the presence of the ghostly animals around me, confirming my suspicions that there were indeed spirits from another realm. She told me that these ghosts were drawn to me for some reason, but she couldn't say why that reason was. Instead, she advised me to keep an open mind and embrace the spiritual world around me. And so, that's what I've been doing. Every time I see one of these ghostly animals, I try to connect with it, to understand why it's there and what it's trying to tell me. It's not always easy. The spirits are elusive and hard to communicate with, but I'm determined to keep trying. I don't know if I'll ever truly understand the presence of these ghostly animals in my life, but I'm grateful for the experience and for the chance to explore the unknown. Who knows what other mysteries the world has in store for me? What was running upstairs? During the summers, my boyfriend and I take care of my parents' house while they're out traveling. The summer of 2017 was extremely hot here, so we slept in our basement to try to hide from the heat. My boyfriend worked as a handyman at the time and would get up at 6 in the morning. I worked the register at a store in time, so we worked very different hours. The morning in question went as one could expect. At 6 a.m., my boyfriend gave me a peck on the cheek, told me he was off to work, and left me snoozing in bed. About 2 years later, I woke up to a bang upstairs. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, groggy from sleep. I hear the unmistakable sound of bare feet running on hardwood floor. It started at the opposite end of the house and ran until it stood right over and only to run back again. Being the lazy bum I am, I texted my boyfriend from the bed. LMAO. What have you forgotten this time? Need me to come help? As I heard the footsteps run back and forth, my iPhone dinged. What? I'm at work, LOL. As I read the message, I can feel my blood turn cold as the steps stopped right above me. My first thought was that someone had broken in. I grabbed an old brandy stick my parents had stored away and started sneaking upstairs, ready to knock whoever had broken in the hell out. An empty house greeted me. I felt the door. It was as locked as it had been the night before. I stood in our sunny living room, where we had heard the steps stop. Suddenly, my improvised weapon felt very obsolete. There's something in the basement. My sister had a sleepover with a friend this weekend. They were both down in the basement because of the rec room we have there. It's pretty cozy with an old Xbox, an easel for painting, some old armchairs and comics. My sister and her friend often played around there by themselves, painting, playing Minecraft, usually 13-year-old stuff. We're used to bring them being alone down there, and our old basement isn't seen as creepy or unsettling in any way. On Friday night, however, our evening got interrupted by the girls scrambling upstairs, shrieking like a couple of bats out of hell. "There's something in the basement!" my sister screamed. We figured they'd gotten spooked by a spider or something like that, so my parents went down to check. The basement was found empty. The girls were asked what all the fuss was about, and they told my parents the door handle to the basement started rattling so hard the entire door started shaking. I later asked my sister what all the yelling was about, and she showed me what happened. It was like something was trying to rip the door off, she said while grabbing the door handle and yanking on it like someone was trapped. It couldn't have been a draft, as the bathroom isn't connected to any of the outside walls, nor does it have any windows. The girls were laughing and giggling like crazy from the excitement of getting spooked like that, and we left it at being weird but harmless. It did, however, remind me of something that I remember happened to me as a kid in the same basement. I must have been 8 years old. I had gotten my own key, and I was allowed to walk home on my own. I knew my parents were at work, so I unlocked the door and stepped inside. As I did, I looked at the basement door. The door had been removed now. And as I stepped inside, I saw the door handle start to rattle and the door opening. I got so scared I bolted out of the house straight over to my friend's house, bawling my eyes out the entire time. Once my parents came home and I told them what happened, they explained what a cross draft and how it's the most likely to would have caused the door to open. I believed it back then, but after this weekend, I'm not so certain.